in the bottom left now. In the red, he is for Blazer. His name, Krystianer.
And in the bottom right, looking here to save his run in this group stage. This might be his last and best shot at it. Ladies and gentlemen, from Alien Esports, it's SoulSpirit. And yeah, as we said, 1-3, it's not the best scoreline. 0-4 is even worse for Krystianer, who, I mean, hasn't necessarily been playing like awful. It's just been that things haven't been working out for him. The matches have not been going his way. The games have just kind of started to fall apart in places. And so, as Krystianer, you're kind of playing spoil sport, because for SoulSpirit, this is the best shot that he has. He can go 2-3 here. That gives him potentially a chance to go, if he absolutely suddenly starts wrecking people, 4-3, which is absolutely enough to advance, but it's a hard ask for both these players.
That it is, and Krystianer's been rather vocal online about how he doesn't really feel confident in his form right now. He doesn't really feel confident. He's promised us to twit longer once the season is over. So that's never good. I'm hoping that we can see maybe a little bit better of a performance for the man, because at times he has looked downright terrifying. If we look at online tournaments, specifically Chicken Man's online cup, the man has won that thing something like 60 times now. So that is often against the top players in the game. For whatever reason, he's really good. So we have seen promise Titan. Krystianer has shown us that he has the ability to play well and has the ability to beat rather solid opponents. But I guess something about DreamHack, his personal situation, whatever, seems like he's not playing up to his normal standards in this tournament thus far. But we're going to have to see whether this Stargate opening, that's going to maybe turn things around a little bit.
Yeah, and the main thing that we saw in his the last series, at least I casted, of him versus a laser, it was interesting because we got the kind of duality of watching that series after we got Hellraiser versus SoulSpirit, and the series kind of had a very similar storyline where for SoulSpirit in PvZ right now, it just feels like he needs to get the early game down because he took so much damage from Hellraiser, who played, frankly, really incredible double prong harassment in the early game, but it wasn't anything super committed. It was 2 Oracles and it was 2 Adepts, and those 2 units managed to get so much damage that Hellraiser snowballed those 2 games that he did win out of control. And for Krystianer, he actually made some rather odd choices in his builders, but this is a nice shade in already. Gonna get 2 drone kills, and you're gonna be pretty happy with that. Of course, you will lose the Adepts, but snagging a 3rd, always worthwhile. That's a decent start here for Krystianer.
That it is. I mean, ideally you get 4, right? That is the point where it roughly breaks even. It's not perfect, but close enough. But Krystianer certainly has the tempo in the game right now as Norco looks to fly in. Finds 2 queens, though, and that means its time in this mineral line's a little bit low, but it gets 1 on the way out, and it doesn't take too much damage, so we're going to be fine there. And behind this Krystianer, he is already transitioning into ground tech. We have a Robo Facility on the way. Couple additional gateways, but no Twilight just yet, Titan. This is not going to be your... I'm not even going to say your standard, but your traditional Oracle into Twilight type of an idea. Something a little bit lower tech in this push.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost giving me... well, it's almost giving me parting vibes with the Soul Train kind of here, where you don't really have any upgrades. Of course, you would want Blink Stalkers even with a build like that, but it's just mass gateways so far from Krystianer. And when I was saying weird build choices in that series versus a laser, we did see him go, all right, double Oracle into Glaive to Depths, but then the timings just didn't work out. He didn't actually manage the double prong, and that build kind of fell flat on his face. But it seems like here is once again going to be kind of starting to peer towards that aggression. Immortals in production. The Twilight Council is finally popped down, but it's going to be a while until Krystianer actually has access to any of those upgrades.
I mean, that it will. But for now, what are we on? We're at 4 gateways here. I kind of thought I saw a 5th going down, but 4 gateways here. Twilight or Warp Prism is out on the map, and Krystianer just sharking around a little bit. He's not going to massively commit to this just yet. As you said, we do need to wait for those upgrades for the Twilight, for the Templar Archives, for his third base to complete, for these Immortals to pop out. And it really does feel like he is, while this is some aggressive options early, it does feel like he's gearing up for that Charge Lot Archon Immortal idea that was so popular years ago. As the Depths find their way into the natural here, a couple workers will pay the price. Will it be 3? Actually, looks like he's going to get 4, even more damage than he got earlier on, maybe 5.
Ooh.
So nice job there from Krystianer, just catching SoulSpirit a little bit off guard, where he's maybe not expecting that type of move at the moment. But as roaches continue to find their way out here, it does feel like at least the times for those types of moves, you send 2 Adepts in and they get inordinate damage, it does feel like that stage of the game that maybe was, well, Krystianer's last attempt.
Yeah, and I mean, this is kind of what we've seen for SoulSpirit, is where the early game is where he feels the weakest, and he oftentimes will take quite a bit of damage just from 2 Adepts making their way in, from the Oracles just diving into a mineral line. And it is quite concerning, especially against, when we saw him against Hellraiser, when you see him against these Protoss players who are able to take advantage of that, as the Stasis Ward will be nicely dodged. Only 2 drones trapped, not at all that bad. But it's really, I mean, this series, I think, is probably going to be decided by how well SoulSpirit can mitigate this early damage, because to this point, you lose 11 drones. It's not game ending, but of course, you're going to be slightly delayed in your production, in your tech, because you had to rebuild those drones. And we see that 4th base is quite late for SoulSpirit.
I mean, that it is. That's the big deal. And this may be because SoulSpirit is expecting aggression. He saw the Warfers, we saw the Archons in it. And so he says, look, I need to build a lot more stuff here before I start to take that 4th base. But Krystianer has really just been powering up. More Charge Lots on the way, more Archons on the way. He's already on 4 Immortals outside of this 3rd base. And yeah, he's got 5 popping out right now. This army that Krystianer is building, supply side, not super high just yet. His gateways are not finished, as again, that stasis trap's not going to get all that much. But the oomph, the sheer power that this army has is going to be significant in the coming 1 to 2 minutes. The one thing he's going to be missing, of course, is that Storm, the ability to just remove lots of Lings and Banelings from the map pretty quickly. But now, here the man comes. He's active on the map here. He's got 4 Archons, 5 Immortals, and just enough Zealots to add a little bit of joie de vivre here. 1 Ravager goes down to start, and here comes the push of Krystianer. Titan, but on the other side of the map, SoulSpirit, he's got an idea of his own. That is a lot of roaches on the left side, and it will force Krystianer back just a little bit. Good force fields, though.
Yeah, those force fields just cutting off the retreat path, and it's a nice idea to counterattack when your opponent's moving out, but, I mean, Krystianer just pulls back, says, hey, I don't really need to push right now. Of course, this will buy more time for SoulSpirit to build up his army, but it's just roaches. And when you think of an army that shreds through roaches, Beowulf, 6 Immortals does that job pretty good. There's a lot of power here. These roaches, they're not going to last very long. And even though, I mean, it's only a 30 supply difference even at that. And with Roach Ravager, you want to have, at least 40 supply ahead of your opponent, as these force fields again just cutting off the army. And you just see how much damage these Immortals do.
That we absolutely are. Now, the Bios landed on a couple of them, which if Krystianer continues to take that damage, it would be a problem. A lot of these Immortals have lost their hardened shields for now, as the Roach is trying to get on top of the Archons, knocking them down. But you're right about one thing, Titan. It's not about these Archons. They're there to deal with the drones. They're there to deal with the Lings. The Roaches, they're pretty much handled by these Immortals. So now moving forward, if 1 Archon does pop, Roach is trying to find value. But the 4th base of Krystianer has, in fact, hit the dirt. A couple sentries joining in. I guess that were warped in rather soon. But we're at 7 Immortals now, and this Roach Ravager army on equal upgrades is really not situated to take a fight. Now, of course, Krystianer does have to be careful as he runs away while he's still on creep. The Roaches are going to try to chase, but there we go. Hot pickups for now, keeping all these Immortals alive. Bios land, but the force fields are fantastic. And we talked about the supply differential, the 30 supply differential. Well, it's still a decent army supply, but that means Krystianer is up in workers against the Zerg player. He's up in bases soon enough against the Zerg player, and that is never a situation that SoulSpirit wants to be in.
Yeah, he will be able to knock down that building. 4th gets the cancel, but you can't really stay here for long. The Immortals, they are going to crab walk their way forward, although this is a nice dive here by SoulSpirit. Sees that Krystianer was a little bit undefended, but as soon as those cannons turn around, the entire line of roaches just falls to the ground, and it's honestly brutal and ridiculous how quick this Roach army melts as soon as those Immortals start firing.
Titan, a solid like 80, like a solid 60% of this army supply from the Protoss right now is Immortals. He's got 10 of them. He's got 11 on the way. And the crazy thing about this is only single robo production. He's just been building Immortals and not losing them for the entirety of this game. Those Biles really knocked the land. Almost did though, and here comes the army of a Krystianer once again. His opponent is only on 3 bases. This Roach army is going to be difficult to resupply as things move forward, but man, SoulSpirit has been on top of things with these Roach run-bys. And remember, Roach run-bys, they care less about units in the wall. They can just kind of kill it and move on. It's not the, well, Lings have a Zelt in the wall, good luck, they're never getting through. So they are forcing Krystianer back. They are forcing him to maybe not capitalize on this advantage that he's built for himself. And here comes SoulSpirit once again on the right side. He looks like he's going to get a cancel on this 4th base once again.
Yeah, I mean, even though this game looks dire in terms of just the army value and composition, SoulSpirit managing to find value in the positioning as, he's going to get caught out here, Krystianer. He's going to have to dodge the Biles, but you're going to have to loop around the long way here with this Roach army. It's just so scary to try and fight this Protoss army. I mean, you said it. Krystianer, he's been building Immortals since the start of the game. This has been his plan. Just get a crap ton of Immortals and hope that your opponent doesn't go mutas in any large numbers. But here we go. Once again, the Roach counterattack. And SoulSpirit, you're trying to buy time, but I don't know if Krystianer is going to give it to him anymore.
12 Immortals, Titan. That's all I have to say of this game. That's the only bit of analysis we're going to use. But the Roaches, they are continuing to find value. They have depowered the Robo. These Zealots that warp in are really not all that great against them, even with +2. So the Roaches, they find their way in the main base. They're going to keep trying to target these pylons down, take some of the oomph out of the reinforcements that Krystianer is going for. As again, the Zealots, the SimCity is really working in SoulSpirit's favor here. He's got a lot of ranged units. The Zealots are melee. They're not really able to come to the bear. But now we're going to see an Archon get popped here. More and more Biles are starting to land, but Krystianer, he's looking to roll in. And because the Biles were spent early, now they're not going to knock these force fields down. It allows Krystianer to take a much more positive fight. More Ravagers do fall. This 4th base is so important for SoulSpirit. He has to hold it. Some of these Immortals starting to get rather low. Now SoulSpirit trying to get on top of things. But the splits are going to be fantastic. And we're still looking at 11 Immortals. Only 1 has died in this fight. The army supply of SoulSpirit starting to fall. And this is where things start to become rather problematic, Titan. It's a problem indeed. The Immortals are killing off everything. Only Ravagers remain, and you do not want to fight with only Ravagers. So here on the left side, Biles continue to rain down. More and more Zealots warp in. More and more Archons warp in. And as the supplies equalize, he's even adding Stalkers here. Those are going to fight much better against these Roaches than the Zealots that we've had earlier.
Yeah, the Biles are still landing, but I mean, even though you managed to get rid of some of the Immortals, you don't have any Lings in this army. You don't have any buffer to stop them from just knocking down the Roaches. The 4th will fall. That means that there's not really any economy left here for SoulSpirit. Krystianer is just going to keep walking forward. He says, I don't care how much you have. I got a lot of health, and I got some big, powerful guns, and that's all that I need to knock down every single unit that you have on the map. And the Gambit paid off for Krystianer. He said, listen, I'm going all in on those Immortals. And I hope you go Roaches, and SoulSpirit did just that.
Exactly, a powerful Gambit. And those Immortals were immortal in that game. You don't always see it, but they did not die.
Yeah, it was, I mean, that's just kind of brutal to watch because there's not much that SoulSpirit can do. You obviously want to have the Roaches to defend against Adepts, but it feels like it was a very linear game plan from SoulSpirit in this ZVP. I get my Roach Warren, I build some units to defend against an early push, which you thought was coming, didn't actually end up ever finding its way across the map because Krystianer was just sitting back and building up an Omega Deathball army that you can never fight unless you are also tacking up. And I think a lot of that has to do with not the best Ling scouting. I think, after the first few Lings that came out in that game, SoulSpirit didn't add on any more. And even with Roach comps, you'll see Korean Zergs, they continually add in Zerglings. They're good buffers. They can soak up damage. They distract the Protoss Immortals, and they allow your Roaches to deal damage. You can scout with them. They're very useful to have in there. And I just feel like SoulSpirit was not working with enough information and ended up just kind of doing what his opponent wanted.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right about that. Lings are fantastic against Immortals. Eventually, they're good against Stalkers. Not that that was really relevant until the game ended, pretty much. But absolutely, you send the Lings in, you take the fight. Once all the Lings die, you back up, you do it again. We saw Bailey Nest come down. We saw +1 melee come down for SoulSpirit, but it was all late. on the flip side, his ability to consistently get roaches in his opponent's base. Now, they weren't the most impactful because the Zealots and Immortals finishing did a good enough job at handling them. Those run-bys were not something that we see Zerg players do all that often, and it did look good. But imagine, like, you bust the door open with 4 roaches, and then you send a bunch of Lings instead. That is a lot more damage potential in that game. And then that buys maybe even more time, because Lings are more elusive than, say, a bunch of roaches are. And then maybe you can get 30 Banes out to come crashing into the Zealots in that army and wipe them down, then you can jump on top of the Immortals. It really did feel like, as you said, the complexity of the army from SoulSpirit just never quite got to where it needed to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be heading on into game number 2. It's going to be 2,000 atmospheres, and we'll have to see if SoulSpirit can try and make his way back into this series, because he really needs to. And again, this is really your last chance. You have hard matches that are going to be coming up, so you need to get this win if you even want to have a chance as SoulSpirit.
And technically, Krystianer is not mathematically eliminated. Now, he's not in a good spot, but if he wins the rest of his matches and a bunch of other things go his way, he does have maybe an opportunity, but, you know, you got to have to do 0 this, absolutely. So we're going to have to see if that happens. 2,000 atmospheres is map 2 Titan. Let's get into it. In the upper right, in the red, he's up 1, holding really well against the shenanigans that his opponent has tried to inflict upon him. He is Krystianer.
And in the bottom left, looking here to tie up this series to keep what feels like his hopes alive in this match. Ladies and gentlemen, from Alien Esports, it's SoulSpirit. And, you know, the thing is, we obviously see that build from Krystianer in game 1. It's very much dependent on what your opponent is doing. If your opponent is gonna be just building roaches, if you expect that, works great, you know, beautiful, you're in a great position in that game. However, I think the issue is, I don't know if that works again, and it felt like a very... I mean, I said it was a linear build for SoulSpirit, but the same could absolutely be said for Krystianer. It was Immortals, Charge Lots +1, that was his army, and then he eventually moved out on the map and killed his opponent.
No, Titan, it wasn't Immortals, Charge Lot Archons +1, move on the map, kill your opponent. It was Immortals. And Immortals. And Immortals. And we continued to build Immortals. And I cannot get over the fact that he got it to, I think the max was 12 Immortals. He did start to lose them as he ended the game. But he got up to 12 Immortals off a single Robo. That, sure, 12 Immortals off double Robo, fine. You know, that's something that is not too crazy to me. But off of 1 Robo, that is like a solid 6 minutes of production just building Immortals.
And I think it also goes to show, as SoulSpirit, he took enough damage in the early game. I mean, 11 drones, obviously not game ending, but it's enough that it slowed down the Zerg so much that you can't really punish the Protoss for being that greedy. With just sitting on 3 bases, building up this massive army, SoulSpirit, I mean, also didn't have any information. He was never in a position where he could look at the map and say, oh, well, maybe I just take a few extra bases. I get into something other than roaches. Maybe I go into a Spire. You know, Ling, I mean, even against that composition, Ling Hydra might have been good. But we haven't seen that in a while in PvC.
I mean, there's a reason we don't see Ling being Hydra as much anymore. Storms, you can get them out fairly quickly. It doesn't take that long to research. And let me sing you a song of how quickly Hydras die to Storm. It's not pretty. That entire composition does explode to any sort of anti-light damage. And yes, technically Banes are not light. As the Adepts, they're going to find their way into the natural. 2 workers make it 3. No. Ooh, nice save there from SoulSpirit, but he's going to lose 1 anyway. So make it 3. Don't make it 4. And Krystianer, he's having a nice start to this game, just like the last one.
Yeah, and it's the same story here for SoulSpirit. You lose those 3 drones at the start. It's not necessarily awful. You know, you get the 2 Adepts, so that's that pressure off the map, but now you need to protect against the Oracle. And Interestingly enough, we just don't see the Spore Crawlers up yet. Now, 2 Queens in a mineral line is going to be enough to deter it, but you are going to want to place down those Spore Crawlers fairly soon, as it's a bit of a different build here for Krystianer. He's mixing it up. That's going to be a second Stargate and Phoenix production.
Oh, that's pretty cool. We've started to see double Stargate Phoenix become a little bit more popular. It's something that Hero has been doing. As Oracle says, oh, hey, there are some drones here popping out, but he does force double cancel at the very least. It's actually keeping the energy on, which means he's going to waste a little bit here. But looks like there are no queens, and the natural spore does just complete. So 2 workers, they do fall at the end of the day. But talking about this double Phoenix play that we got here, Titan, we've seen Hero start to mess around with it a little bit. But it's not double Phoenix for the sake of double Phoenix. It's double Phoenix for the sake of forcing out anti-Phoenix play. And then you go into like a lot of, say, disruptors or something like that. And then it really does play like the Zerg has historically played, where you go 1 tech to force your opponent to move into something, and then you hit him with the counter.
Yeah, and in the Hero example, I think the biggest, or the most common tech switch that he has chosen is double Phoenix. You, of course, hide it as Krystianer is doing. This is how you should be playing this, where you're going to force a panicked reaction out of the Zerg, so they're going to have to respond quite strongly. They can't just sit back and say, oh, well, I'll build a few spores, and then maybe I'll eventually get into, maybe corruptors, and then, they can't take their time with it because you spring a trap onto them, and then you're transitioning Charge Lot, Blink Stalker, this mass amount of gateways, ground army, where you can attack multiple places once, and you can almost play like the Zerg with run-bys, just constantly going across the map. Ooh, that Oracle gets low, but it will manage to find its way out.
That it will. So, SoulSpirit, I think you hit upon something. SoulSpirit's ability to scout has been maybe not the best this series, which is kind of funny to think about considering how often he was in his opponent's natural in that last game. But it remains true here, as now the Phoenix looking to dive into the other side of the map. And this is where things get annoying. We've heard about Corsair DT in an older game, but it doesn't really matter. The point is, he's going to kill some queens, but more importantly, he's going to knock down a lot of these overlords, supply blocking SoulSpirit in the extreme. In fact, SoulSpirit's pretty supply blocked right now. The queens, they're trying to do what they can, but they're just getting knocked down one at a time. We're going to go down to 0 queens in just a second. Literally no anti-air, no transfuses. SoulSpirit's starting to realize he has to run across the map to make something happen. But what do we have here on the other side? Actually, we don't have a lot. These roaches may be a bit of a problem here, Titan.
Yeah, the recall is going to be popped, and I think SoulSpirit made the grave mistake of trying to fight Phoenix without the spores. That's just not how you should approach this build. When you see the Phoenix, you need to retreat all your queens to those spore crawlers, add a second one into each base, goes across the map, and this counterattack is just going to get cleaned up with that recall. And suddenly Krystianer is in a wonderful position, as he's going to begin Immortal production 2 at a time this time. So, we might get to that 12 Immortal number just a little bit quicker.
I almost wish it was just Charizard Archon Storm, because we're seeing just lots of Hydras on the field, and Hydras can be a powerful timing against Phoenix play, especially a Phoenix play that, say, doesn't kill any workers. But I would argue that SoulSpirit has absolutely gotten enough. He's killed, 7 queens, 6 queens. He's killed some overlords. He's going to run across the map now, killing even more of them. So the production just does not exist, Titan. We're looking at 2 queens on the map right now after a couple more have died. No injects are banked. He's just trying to get himself back into that. You will not have enough larva to really sustain this push, especially as overlords continue to fall, especially as SoulSpirit continues to have to spend some of that larva to allow himself to build other units. Man, you got to keep overlords over the spores. You got to have 2 spores a base, and neither of these things are true, and always just going to catch the Hydras on the rally as well. More overlords are falling. This feels like it's starting to snowball, Titan.
Yeah, I mean, again, SoulSpirit, he's trying to fight the Phoenix, and that's just not how you should approach this. Losing stray Hydras, the real strength of the Hydra timing is that you get a massive ball of them, and especially with Krystianer going Immortals, it wouldn't necessarily even be the worst. It would actually probably be quite good to just have a Hydra bust coming across the map, but just losing this much to these Phoenix feels just very, very sloppy. And I mean, we're harping on it because it's so important to have more spore crawlers than there are. 1 per base is not enough because there's no safe zones outside of your bases. There's 1 here in the middle between the natural and the third, but you need a few more than that.
Ooh, I like this, though. We talked about, I don't know how I feel about Immortals against a Ling Hydra or Ling Hydra Bane Bust. They're not the best, but we're at double Robo Colossus popping out of this. +1 air for these Phoenix as well. Krystianer, we talked about how anti-light just butchers Hydras and butchers Lings. Well, we're getting into that one pretty damn quickly. The question is whether SoulSpirit is going to be able to react in time. I don't know that he is. His supply is not in the worst spot right now, and he's building more Hydras, getting Hydra speed. I believe he already, yes, he did get range. But, I mean, imagine this push when you have all these Phoenix to lift something, and then say 4 Colossus. 4 Colossus and Charge Lots. It just really is something that SoulSpirit will struggle against, and he does not have an Infestation Pit on the way. No Hive on the way. No Vipers to truly deal with this Robotech that Krystianer is putting out on the map.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I think SoulSpirit has done a good job getting up to 4 bases, getting up to a decent drone count. Of course, you'd like to have more, but he has to prepare for the fact that there might be a push coming across the map, or for the fact that he wants to go across the map. And guess what? There's only 2 Colossus out. They don't have +1, but that's going to be finishing up in 10 seconds. And you're working with Roach Hydra, and I'm not going to make the analogy right now because we're on broadcast, but this composition, sure, it does damage, but it's not that efficient at trading out, especially when you have Immortals and Colossus already here for your opponent.
I mean, you lose 1 Colossus for free in the middle of the map, and that does put a smile on SoulSpirit's face, but now he's running back home. He says, oh, no, this army's a little bit scarier. Run. The Zealots, they're going to chase them back for now. SoulSpirit may be realizing that he cannot take this fight. Hive is on the way because he now understands what this game needs, and it does need those Vipers. But the Templar Archives is done. We have High Templars on the map. Storms are going to be on the way eventually. And that also means we're going to be able to hit these feedbacks. So assuming Krystianer can position himself appropriately, it's not like Vipers immediately end the game for SoulSpirit here.
Yeah, it's going to be a nice tool, but it's going to be so hard to maneuver them in this game. And I mean, with this army composition, honestly, if SoulSpirit had the time, again, it's a situation where honestly, Broodlords might be good. Of course, you have double Stargate back at home, so eventually Void Rays will be produced, but there's options here for SoulSpirit, and luckily Krystianer, he's taking a 4th, you know? He's just kind of taking his time. He's trying to build up, and that means that as the Zerg, you also are going to have that time available to try and find yourself an army that will hopefully be able to deal a little bit better with what the Protoss is amassing.
I mean, this is a 4-base Protoss against a 4-base Zerg, and you talk about, giving the Zerg time to grow, to do things. Well, Titan, I feel like with the time, Krystianer gets more. Say if you get 1 amount of value per minute as the Zerg, Krystianer's getting 1.5. Zealots into the main base, into the 4th base here. Roaches and Hydras, they try to respond, but they're actually just getting knocked down. The Hydras are expensive. They're not exactly what you want to lose. And it looks like he's losing some Hydras in the middle of the map as well. Krystianer, he's maxed out. He has his Storm available. The Charge Lots are trying to do something, but we're going to look at this fight on the 4th base because that is what truly matters here. Roach is trying to get on top of things. Actually, no force fields, which is kind of what you want with this army, but the Storms are going to soften everything up anyways. Queens running forward only to their doom. Now, it doesn't look like we have a lot of Warpins here, but those Storms, Titan, absolutely massive. Colossus gently microing backwards, trying to make something happen. But SoulSpirit with us +2, he's actually able to get on top of this army just a little bit. The Colossus are starting to fall. SoulSpirit, he's going to knock down the complexity of this army, but Titan, I don't know how much that matters at the end of the day. It is so expensive for SoulSpirit to do this, and there we go. Krystianer, he's gotten a clean 2-0.